Cloud. Cloud server. Looks like we're recording. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to the Inspire Life podcast. I am Michael, your producer, also your co-host, and today really excited to be interviewing Natalia Pellegrino. She is a naturopathic doctor, and this is going to be, we'll talk about what naturopathy, did I say that right?
Naturopathic medicine.
Naturopathic medicine. Okay, talk about what naturopathic medicine is, how it can help your life. But before we start, Natalia, if you just want to tell us, about yourself, how you got into naturopathic medicine, and I'll start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, long story short, I became interested in health in my teens because I started to see a lot of my very close family members developing sort of chronic illnesses, like lots of cardiovascular disease, lots of diabetes, people passing away way too young from chronic illness. So it sparked my interest in nutrition, and I started looking at things like diet and stress reduction as ways to improve your lifestyle. And in my path, I ended up going to massage therapy school. I studied traditional Chinese medicine through my school. I did that for about 10 years. And I always had naturopathic medicine kind of on the back burner, something that I knew I wanted to do one day, just to go more in depth. And it was a way for me to help more people and just go more in depth into root cause medicine. So that's what led me to become a naturopath. And I'm currently practicing at Be Well Natural Medicine in St. Paul. It's a group practice of all NDs, or naturopathic doctors. And we see all different health conditions, which I'm sure we will get into a little bit more, but that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. So, your personal experience and kind of witnessing what living an unhealthy lifestyle and how that impacted people close to you kind of led you towards that path.
Absolutely.
It's very cool. It's powerful. So a lot of personal connection there. So, when it comes to naturopathic medicine, there's probably a good amount of our listeners who actually don't even know what it is. You mentioned, nutrition was a part of it, but can you explain, in, I guess, simplest terms, if you can, or whatever terms you want to use, what exactly is naturopathic medicine?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think a lot of people are not sure when they come to see me, but I would describe it most simply as a system. It's a system of primary care medicine where we can basically be your family doctor, but we also work in conjunction with other health providers. So we work with your MD or any other providers on your integrative medicine team. We love collaborative care, just getting you kind of everything that you need in terms of health. But fundamentally, we really combine natural modalities. Like we're trained as primary care doctors. So we're trained to diagnose your condition and see exactly where that's coming from. And that's where we differ from your primary care doctor, where we go a lot more in depth and we use a root cause and more preventative approach. And we rely on natural modalities like nutrition and lifestyle stress reduction and lots of other modalities. I think each naturopathic doctor is very unique in what they focus on. So we all sort of use different modalities and might have a particular group that we focus on. Like me, for example, I am really passionate about women's health and hormones and helping women with all aspects of hormonal health and skincare, digestion. So we see lots of different things, but our approach is very evidence-based. So, I mean, we're trained to look at research and really know like what works as far as natural modalities. And we're taking that preventative approach. So we're not just treating your symptoms and putting a Band-Aid on it. We're trying to transform your health,
Yeah.
essentially.
It's cool. So, what I'm hearing, it's like someone may come in with certain symptoms, and where you really would differ from an MD is you're going to go deep. You're going to find, as you mentioned, the root, or what's truly causing that symptom, rather than just addressing the symptom itself, addressing what is causing that symptom. And a lot of times that comes down to different lifestyle behaviors.
Absolutely. Yeah, we spend a lot of time with people. Like our initial visit is about 90 minutes and each follow-up is at least an hour and sometimes less. But we go into your whole health history. I mean, starting from the day you were born, basically, to really get that whole timeline and look at like all of the triggers over time that led you to this point. So a lot of times what we find is that we're playing detectives. We're really looking at your history and your family history and evaluating you very, very in depth to figure out like what brought you to this point where you might be having some symptoms. And just to give an example, like I often see women who are having issues with periods, for example, and they often feel like, maybe expecting horrible symptoms with each cycle is to be expected, like pain and having to rely on pain medications and things to just treat those symptoms. But when we start treating the root cause, we find that a lot of those things get better, and it's not something where you should just automatically expect to feel horrible. Like we can help you to thrive and feel really good with your cycle and essentially be pain-free. That's the goal.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That part too that you talk about, looking at not only the whole person as they are now, but also their history, and if they've gone through different traumatic experiences, or if they've had different things that could contribute to wherever their physiology is now. That's really cool to hear, and it's that holistic approach, and even more broad is what it sounds like. So
yeah, absolutely. It's very, very holistic, very integrative. We really look at the whole person, and I myself get into mind-body medicine and how like traumatic events have impacted you and maybe triggered things like, being stuck in fight or flight response, or really still affecting your nervous system and your adrenals long after this trauma has happened. And your body, your cells and your nervous system have this memory where you can keep reliving things like traumatic events. So we really look at ways to help with that. And I also do hands-on work like craniosacral, for example, and just
very cool.
Focusing on incorporating daily stress reduction, and it's really unique to what's going on with that person. So I'll usually give them some sort of stress reduction homework to do, because that's a really important foundation.
Very cool. You mentioned something that made me think about, talking about how a lot of times our bodies will hold on to stress and trauma in different ways, especially within the nervous system. And something actually that one of my clients told me yesterday that I think you'll enjoy, maybe you've heard this before, is that it's chasing the tail, right? So like a dog chases its tail, T-A-I-L, while the brain chases the tail, T-A-L-E, right? So a lot of times our bodies will get stuck in a feedback loop of reliving an experience, or not necessarily reliving, or going back to that and having that be a default. And what I'm hearing from you is that, beyond just our physiology, and maybe like as Dr. Mel would talk about our posture and how that shows up in our body, that internally with our hormones, cortisol or adrenal glands, that actually can have a long-lasting impact way beyond the event itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good way of putting it. And I think it's really important to look at what were those triggers? How did it affect you? How are you still potentially having symptoms from that? And a lot of times, I mean, this is really common in my practice. Like somebody comes in for things like autoimmune, or they're very fatigued and they're having thyroid issues. And what we find is that there was a big trauma around the time that these symptoms developed. So it's all about getting back to that and helping people process through that. And I'm not a therapist, but I often will just help people get more in tune with their bodies, and that might involve also collaborating with a therapist and working through that trauma. I think that's really important as well for healing.
Yeah, for sure. The multi-lens approach, and as you mentioned at the start, having a variety of providers who you're working with and making sure that you get that whole scope. So, building off of that, you had mentioned therapists, you had mentioned MDs. What kinds of practitioners, because we have a fair amount of practitioners who listen to the podcast. So what kinds of practitioners do you partner with? Do you work with? In what ways do you do that?
Absolutely. So we work with a lot of MDs, including gynecologists and all types of specialists who, like, if we see the need for further evaluation, like some sort of diagnostics, like you need an ultrasound or something, we're going to send you to your primary, or maybe to go more in depth with lab testing. We can order labs, but if somebody is trying to use their insurance, it might be easier to get some of those things done with their MD. So we'll often do that. I send to a lot of chiropractors and health coaches or hands-on providers, massage therapists, counselors, a lot of counselors within, that practice different specialties like EMDR, or just kind of like whatever I think is indicated for that person. I do a lot of referrals. And we also have a skincare program, and I'll end up referring to a lot of estheticians to have that kind of balance between what we're working on topically and get customized skincare recommendations while we're working on the internal aspects of skin and overall health. Yeah, but we refer all the time. I think it's all about having that support team. Like, we're not trying to be everything to everyone, but people do end up coming to us as their kind of like main healthcare person to guide them, and maybe to figure out, like, do I need to go see my MD, or can we continue some of the natural things? And we're trained to figure that out.
Yeah, very cool. And again, back to that, it's just everyone maybe has a different lens or scope, and it sounds like for a lot of people, you're that person who's going to help them, find which path they need to go. And if it's with you, great. And if they need to find someone else for, maybe something that they're dealing with, you're definitely going to help them find that out. So really cool. Yeah. I did want to ask a little bit, having connections and working with the whole person. And, as we're recording this, it's spring 2020. So with everything going on in health in the world, I'm curious, what have you seen with your clients or with other practitioners with the whole COVID-19 pandemic? Is there anything in particular that you are, screening for with people, or, just maybe even thoughts about the situation? This is a hot topic right now, so I definitely want to get a naturopathic medicine kind of perspective on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I think it's more important than ever right now to really take care of your health. And we're seeing a lot of people that are focusing primarily on immune health. And the fundamental goal of naturopathic medicine and what we do is to get people to a healthy point so that your immune systems are strong and we're not doing damage control. In other words, we're not waiting until you get sick and then trying to treat that. We're trying to prevent. And of course, we don't know exactly what natural modalities are specifically going to help against COVID-19. There's just evolving too rapidly for us to do like large scale research studies on what is helping. But within the naturopathic medicine community right now, we're all talking to each other. We're on Facebook groups. We have email chains going on what we're finding the most helpful. And we're relying on our knowledge of things that we know are going to support the immune system. I mean, there's research studies just showing that not getting enough sleep is going to suppress your immune system and is going to cause more inflammation. So helping people get better sleep and diet is a really important thing. And we've all been posting tips on social media and our websites and our newsletters, just trying to help people get through this with support. And we've transitioned to 100% virtual practice right now, and we're doing a lot of things differently. Like, we're offering shorter appointments if people just want to check in about their immune function, maybe check in on their naturopathic treatment plan, like what should we change right now to help prevent or treat this virus. And again, we don't know what treatments are effective, but we know what works for other viruses like the flu. So we've been relying on certain herbs for, thousands of years. And so that's what we're relying on right now.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is that with this COVID-19, there's a lot of ambiguity from how exactly it's affecting people, to when they're affected, to when they may show symptoms, to how it's spread. And there's a lot that is unknown. But what we do know is that there are things that we can all do on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis that is going to help us ensure that our immunity is at its peak potential, per se. And that, it's really it's that preventative mindset, and that being able to, have those strategies in place and practice them. If you are to contract it, or if your family does, it's going to help ensure, at least for you as an individual, that, hopefully you'll have the best chance of getting through it, and coming out on the other side, still able to thrive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with that too, and immunity in general, you mentioned sleep and nutrition. Is there anything else that you think is maybe, your most important things when it comes to immune function, and that people can, take from this episode and maybe implement today, starting now?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely wouldn't discount the importance of sleep again, and keeping up a really healthy diet. So there's things that you can do for very low cost. I know that there's been some issues with being able to get groceries from the store, but from what I've seen, at least in Minnesota, there's still lots of fresh fruits and vegetables available at most stores. And there's lots of things that you can make with that at home, like hearty soups and broths, things that are really inexpensive and that you could freeze for later and are super healthy. Have started posting a few things on my Instagram just with some of those tips, like recipes and things that are easy to do at home that support your health. So nutrition, having an anti-inflammatory diet, which means avoiding things like sugar or dairy. Like, I was just looking at a research article this morning about, and in the Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine community, like, people have been saying forever that dairy causes mucus. It's like a dampness promoting substance that we don't digest very well. But now there's actual research articles coming out saying that we've tested the sinuses in people eating dairy versus non-dairy, and we've seen there's far less congestion when you don't eat dairy. So, and I know that that's not a very popular one because a lot of people love their dairy, but I will say that especially if you start to get symptoms, like if you're feeling run down, cut out the dairy and the sugar. And in general, if you start feeling run down, the best thing you could do is just rest. That's your body telling you to rest, get lots of sleep, do more fasting, like broths and soups, things that are very light and easy to digest, because your body's using a lot of energy to fight off that infection. So resting, super important. Things like taking Epsom salt baths, or even doing contrast showers, like switching between hot and cold. That's just something that will naturally support your circulation, supports your defenses. Other simple things like just gargling with salt water, doing like saltwater sprays or like saline rinses in your sinuses, especially if you've gone out, like if you're going to the grocery store, make sure that you're gargling and spraying your sinuses when you get home, or even just like showering, because a lot of people are saying like how long this virus can last on surfaces, and it's airborne, so it could just be on your skin or in the air. So like showering, take off whatever you can as soon as you get home, leave your shoes at the door. And then one of the other big things is, I know this is a really stressful time, but I can't emphasize enough just how important it is to have a stress reduction practice. And a lot of apps and like fitness apps, yoga, meditation apps are offering things for free, like totally free, just to support people with some sort of stress. So we're not just sitting at home focusing on the news all day. Like, it's good to know what's going on, but we need to also filter what's coming in every moment, because that's causing a lot of stress, which also suppresses your immune function. So those are the basics. And then I would go beyond that into nutrients and herbs, but I don't know if you have a specific question, and then I could talk more about like specific, like more things you can do.
Yeah, well, I think, as a baseline, all of those strategies, are great places to start. I think about me personally, if I start feeling symptoms of any kind, I think I've shared with you, I have a mucus clearing like diet that I created. That's usually one of my go-tos, along with the extended fast, to let my system kind of be in more of a resting state and clear out a lot of toxins. The one thing that you mentioned though at the end there that I thought was really cool was stress reducing strategies in our lives, because I mean, you said it best. If we're feeling stressed out about things, there's different hormones in our body that are going to reduce our immune system function. So, from a naturopathic doctor, what is maybe your favorite 1 or 2 or 3 kind of stress reduction techniques that you use on a daily or weekly basis?
Yeah, so I really like some of the apps. Like I love listening to something where you have like a guided meditation, like something on Headspace, or even listening to like a like progressive muscle relaxation, where you're focusing on each area of the body and just relaxing each muscle. And I really love deep breathing practices. So a really simple one, especially if you're feeling stressed, is to just kind of count your breaths or count the pace of your breathing. So and each thing is 4 seconds long. So you're basically inhaling 4 seconds, and then you hold at the top of the inhale for 4 seconds. And then you exhale over 4 seconds and hold at the bottom of the exhale for 4 seconds. And then you do that 4 times or more. And what that does is it's a way to just kind of reset your nervous system and get you back in your body. Because when you get stressed and focused on things in the news and you're feeling palpitations or worried, it's very normal. This is perfectly normal. We're all going through this together right now. We all have, different levels of stress about the situation, but it's more important than ever to do some of these strategies and just make it a regular thing. But also, I mean, even just talking to friends, keeping in contact with your family and maintaining those connections, and laughing and just has something to balance out all of the stress, I think is really important.
I love that. I've heard of that breathing technique called box breathing before.
Mm-hmm.
First time I actually ever heard of it was like post-training, like deregulation. Do they call it deregulation or regulation? But after you do a physical training, like in a high intensity training, any sort of training, doing that breathing afterwards will help bring you back more to that parasympathetic state, so your body can start recovering right away.
Right.
And you bring up the social aspect, which is so important. Using things like we are, like Zoom, and checking in on grandma and grandpa or parents. We're social beings. So even though we are right now being advised to stay home and do social distancing, there are more ways than ever, right? Technology is really cool right now, and where we can, you and I are having this conversation face to face, even though we're miles apart. So a lot of really cool and interesting tips, and I really appreciate you sharing, personally things that you do as well.
Absolutely.
So before we wrap things up, I do want to ask just a couple more questions. First, how can people get in touch with you if they maybe have questions about working with you or naturopathic medicine in general? Start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I'm at Be Well Natural Medicine. So that's just bewellnaturalmedicine.com. And there's a clinic Instagram that's Be Well Natural Medicine MN. And then I have my own personal Instagram, which is just DRNATALIA.ND, where I'll be sharing some immune tips throughout the coming weeks and months. And I mentioned our clinic is in St. Paul, but we're fully set up to do virtual visits and these exact types of visits using Zoom. So you are still getting some of that connection. It's not just sort of like random person on the phone. Like, it's nice to have that face-to-face connection.
Awesome. So I will include the information in the bio too, so people can find and connect with you. And then last question I have, it's kind of a broad question, but if there's one piece of advice or one takeaway or just one thing that you want listeners of this episode to take with them into their lives, especially during this time, what would that piece of information be?
I think that, that is a broad question, and I could probably go on for about an hour just on that alone. But I think the biggest takeaway is maintaining your health and maintaining that prevention, and not skipping your regular health promoting practices like your exercise and your healthy diet and your sleep, and just maintaining that schedule and making modifications as needed. Like, maybe you have to go for a walk instead of going to the gym right now, or just work out in your house. And just going along with the free meditation apps, there's tons of fitness apps that are also offering free services right now that you can do workouts at home, which is amazing. Exercise, really great. Keep moving to keep your immune functioning really well. And just, I think that's the main takeaway. Just keep up your preventative practices. And as naturopathic doctors, we're here to support you in doing that.
Very cool. Well, you heard it from Natalia. I mean, even though there's been a lot of change and things going on, and maybe we can't go to the same places where we do some of our self-care practices, being able to adapt and continuing to do those practices is going to be huge, especially now as we're all together getting through this pandemic. So
absolutely.
Natalia, thank you so much for being on the Inspire Life podcast today. And I look forward to seeing you and working with you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and everyone, as always, keep inspiring. Thank you.
Hey there, did you find value in today's episode? We sure hope so. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.
Also, hop on over to Facebook and join the Inspired Living community. There, Dr. Mel and I share health and wellness tips to help you live your most inspired and thriving life.
And as always, keep inspiring.